It is Monday, July 10th at 6 p.m. and I call this regularly scheduled Dunwoody City Council meeting to order unless there's an objection. Seeing none, the meeting is called to order. Councilman Hennigan, can you please lead us in the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand if you are able. At this meeting, help us to make decisions which keep us faithful to our mission and reflect our values. Give us strength to hold to our purpose, wisdom to guide us, and a keen perception to lead us. And above all, keep us charitable as we deliberate. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sergeant Sela, or Chief, you're going to start? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure tonight to bring forward our Teen Police Academy graduates so they can be recognized. This is a program that was the brainchild of Sergeant Silla, and this is the third year that we've had the academy. And I'm going to let him come up and talk about this year's academy graduates and inform you a little bit about the program.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This year, like Chief said, we held our third annual Teen Police Academy. This was developed during COVID, actually during the 2020 year. The first year we had to cancel it because of COVID, but we continued it in 2021, and it's been a success ever since. This year we hosted 15 students. They were all very engaging and really put a lot of effort into the academy. It was held June 12th through the 16th, and each of them had an opportunity to learn about the operations of the Dunwoody Police Department. They took some leadership experience, some training classes. They got an opportunity to go on field trips to the GBI headquarters, the 911 center, DeKalb County Jail, and just a whole week long full of different experiences and things like that. So I just want to have one of the students come and just share her experience, and then we'll have the rest of them come up for a photo with the mayor and council. So Maggie's going to come up and just talk a little bit about her experience in the academy.
Hi, everyone. So I absolutely loved my experience over at the academy. I was able to confirm that this is what I want to do. I want to go into the police force, hopefully work for the GBI or the FBI. I took up an interest in criminal justice and criminal psychology. And I went to this academy thinking, we'll see how it goes. We'll see if I really want to continue this or not. Yes, the answer is yes, I do want to continue this. It is not only fascinating, but it is also great because I want to help out my community and just this country in general to help make this place better. And doing this through the program was able to inspire me to go to other programs, such as a program that I went to I went to Washington, D.C. last week. And that has opened up my mind to even more possibilities. And that is all thanks to Sergeant Sela's program for the police academy.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everybody that was involved with this, from all the instructors that came. We couldn't have done it without them. A lot of people volunteered their times, came in on their off days just to come help teach and train and all of that. So
You want to do a 30-second overview of all the field trips y'all took, or some of the places you went?
yes, so we went to we had the first place that we went as far as field trip goes was the 911 center. They had got an opportunity to talk to all of the dispatchers, how they answer calls and things like that. Then they went to DeKalb County Jail, which is the jail that serves the city of Dunwoody. They met the Sheriff Melody Maddox. They were able to go to different levels of the jail and see what all they experienced there, and some of the things they're implementing at the jail. They also went to the GBI headquarters and saw the way that the agents, process crime scenes. They had mock crime scenes that were set up for them so they can see how they do those things. And so it was pretty good experience for them as far as the trips go. And then they did a lot of things here in the city as well. Like, they did the SWAT team came out and showed them how they operate that. They did a tour of the entire police department. Someone from the Attorney General's office came and talked about gang violence and just a whole lot of things that they got opportunity to experience.
It's a fantastic program. We're very grateful. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for organizing it.
Thank you. So we'll ask all the students to just come up and then we'll get a photo with the mayor and council.
Parents want to move to take your pictures, you can. Wherever you can go. You probably don't get any wider if you can try to stay behind or somehow with the other yellow why would you do that? I don't want to. I go behind. It should be front and center.
Mayor, I would add one additional bit of information. We nominated this program for the Curtis McClung Award of Excellence with the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. And we just found out we're one of 3 finalists for that award. The Teen Police Academy is, and we'll find out in about 3 weeks at the summer conference whether we won that award. And I would say to Maggie, you could join the Dunwoody Police Department when you're 21. That'll be okay too. Thank you.
Right. So as all of you pursue your careers, if you end up in public safety and law enforcement specifically, remember you were here first. Come back and see us. It's always a great place to start and finish too. So thank you all and congratulations. All right, it's time for public comments. We have each speaker is allowed 3 minutes for up to a time limit of 30 minutes. And please just get up, introduce yourself, and the microphone is right here. Laurie Smith. So 3 minutes. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you
And
all.
Laurie, 1 second.
Sure.
Don't start yet, Sharon. Let the people that are leaving, if they want to leave, they can leave, and then we'll start when it's a little emptying out, quieter. All right.
Not used to such a quiet, captive audience.
Yeah, right.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Lori Smith, and I'm representing a group of City of Dunwoody citizens that vehemently against including Cherry Hill Lane and Edson Road in the proposed pathway project suggested by the city. Established in 1960s, Cherry Hill Lane is a neighborhood of 14 houses, half of which the current residents have lived there for well over 25 years. If you were asked anyone who ever resided there to describe the Cherry Hill neighborhood, they would without a doubt describe it with words like quaint, peaceful, and charming. This is all made possible by the lack of through traffic and the creation of such definitive pathways, calming street measures, and unnecessary sidewalks goes against the attributes of this older neighborhood. The adjacent Edson Road enjoys the same characteristics with longtime residents and quiet surroundings. In fact, Edson Road was originally closed off in the mid-1980s due to the increase in cut-through traffic. And while the proposed route is designed for pedestrians and bikes, again, there's no need in this area for the scope of such a path. As a community, we met last week and discussed the proposed pathway the city has considered building, and we, as a group of 25 households, petitioned for the city to exclude Cherry Hill Lane and Edson Road from its current proposed pathway project. There's no need to build 10-foot paths nor provide traffic calming measures to our streets. Just because the federal government will pay for it doesn't mean it's something we need. And we certainly don't need to abide by the magnitude and requirements of the federal money's parameters. Currently, we have residents in the area that enjoy morning strolls with their dogs or afternoon bike rides with their children without the inordinate amount of construction proposed. While we have many reasons for not wanting this path, water drainage and continued erosion from construction being the critical reasons, at this time, we want to stay on target with stating emphatically that we are opposed to the current pathway proposal. A copy of our signed petition is available by request. Thanks.
Thank you. Stephen Katz, approach the microphone. You'll have 3 minutes, sir. Just introduce yourself for the record.
My name is Stephen Katz. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I represent several companies regarding item 5, which I understand has been withdrawn from the agenda, at least temporarily. Is that correct?
It's not 2 ways. You just
Oh, I'm
deliver
sorry.
your remarks.
And as your next door neighbor, our companies look.
We're going to start your clock over, but if you could speak into the microphone so
Sure.
we can hear you better.
Our company.
3 minutes. Go ahead.
our
Start from the beginning. Introduce yourself and start over, please.
My name is Stephen Katz, and I represent several companies, your next door neighbor at 4828 Ashford Dunwoody Road. And we operate several mental health treatment facilities within the city, 5 as a matter of fact, and employ over 250 people in the city of Dunwoody. We look forward to working with the city, its council, and its other council to put forth a fair and good ordinance on mental health treatment facilities and drug rehabilitation facilities, which certainly are quite important to the community and help keep, among others, our police officers safe. But that's really all I have to say. I want to thank the city council. And I moved here actually 50 years ago in August, and the city has come quite a long way since 1973. And it's a very fine place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Brett. Sweeter, I'm going to mess up your last name. So Brett, if you'll just introduce yourself and pronounce your last name for me, that'd be great. You'll have 3 minutes.
So my name is Brett Swider.
Thank you.
Currently Chief Executive Officer at Atlanta Recovery Place, Substance Use Disorder Treatment Facility on Mount Vernon Road. At this time, I'm not going to make a public comment until I do find out whether this is a topic that was led onto today's city council, and I'll refrain from that, but I do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Andrew Marker. I'm so sorry. And you'll have 3 minutes, sir. Introduce yourself and thank you for coming.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Merker. Sandy Spring resident, bought a home in Dunwoody, January of this year. I am here to talk about the proposed ordinance for the residential substance abuse zoning reclassification, I guess, first time classification. I feel that this was brought about because of me, because I proposed a additional program for the city of Dunwoody. I've been working here since 2019. I have 2 residential programs currently operating in the city of Dunwoody, and when I asked for a third, all of a sudden this zoning ordinance came about. I know it was brought up in February. I was not made aware that it was brought up in February to the zoning meeting in June, and argued against the verbiage in the ordinance, and felt that the zoning board did not take the time to understand before passing it through back to you guys. And then at the same time, I went back and watched the organization's meeting on the 27th of February of this year. And when it was asked if anybody had applied for a service to start a business for said thing, it was stopped by somebody in the city council to ensure that Paul answered a question in a certain way, which felt very judgmental towards me. You know, standing businessman in the city of Dunwoody, and future resident as soon as the house is completed. So I just wanted to make that publicly known, that I feel that this ordinance is directed solely and directly at me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Robert Nauman. Approach the microphone, introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you for being here.
I'm Robert Nauman. I live on Idson Road, where you want to put a 12-foot bike path. And that's what I want to speak to. Although I have to tell you, most people know me as Santa. And you are welcome to address me as Santa. As a matter of fact, I have some fans. Oh, they're gone. There were some fans back here earlier. Anytime that a public improvement project is announced, and I know you guys have all been on the council long enough to know that this is true, there is a feeling of not in my backyard. And I'm afraid I'm in that group, but this is a good project. I used to ride my bicycle a lot in Dunwoody, not lately, but a lot around Dunwoody. It was a great place to ride bicycles, and traffic got bad and said, "Hi, we need some bike paths." Well, here it is now that I've retired my bike. And you're starting to build them. You're a little late for me, but don't give it up. Keep working on it. Just be more considerate about the plan. A 12-foot path along either side of Idson Road, where I live, is going to wipe out a lot of mailboxes, a lot of gardens, and it's going to wipe out that cherry tree that I planted. And that's not good. I don't like that. It's totally unnecessary. There's about 10 cars, just to fill you in. Idson Road is a dead end. There's 10 houses along that road, and there's about 10 cars a day that go up and down that road. As a compromise, I know that's not a happy name or word to say around places sometimes. I would suggest that instead of building a 12-foot path, get some paint the what you have for a 12-foot path right down the middle of Idson Road, and declare it the first multi-use roadway in Dunwoody to be used by cars, bicycles, pedestrians, and even dogs that want to walk. With that low amount of car traffic, I don't see much conflict. Especially if you put up a couple of signs and have a couple of blue lights there for a while saying pedestrians and bicyclists have right of way. I have a few neighbors that are a little hard-headed.
Thank you, Mr. Noman.
And they would say, I'm the most hard-headed, but we can do it. We can do that. That
Thank
was
you.
3 minutes.
It goes really fast. We do this again at the end of the meeting if you want to stay. We
Okay.
have another 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I got my point across.
You did. Uh, Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Richard McLeod in here? Could you do business cards? I think there's some confusion. At least potentially if y'all, if the neighbors from Edson and the others Cherry Hill, if you could reach out, Richard is going to give you his card. If you could reach out to him and potentially arrange a meeting, that would be great. Right, it's right. So anyway, thank y'all. Thank you all for coming. And there'll be, like I just said, there's another section of public comment at the end of the meeting. Thank you. Mr. Linton.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor, I do have an item I'd like for y'all to consider on modifying the agenda,
Okay.
and that's on item number 5, the
Mhm.
first read. Review the consideration of a text amendment to create regulations for residential substance abuse treatment centers. On that item, after further consideration, the staff does not feel that item's ready to bring forward. And it is the city's item, you know, we're the city is the sponsor of the item. So we feel we want to bring it back at another time. It will have to be re-advertised and brought forward.
Mhm,
And this is after much consideration of both internal and our external
mhm.
legal counsel as well on this item. So that's what I want to bring up before I go over the report for my city manager.
And I'll take a motion after we do the reports
Okay,
to amend the
Alright.
agenda,
Mayor, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and do the monthly report
please.
for the city manager's office. Under Parks Department, we have on July 29th, have a movie night coming up. We also have the several grooving on the green. We have the one on August the 12th, which is the Back to School Bash. September the 9th is the next one, followed by October the 14th, which is the finale for the year. And also I want to point out, even though it's several months away, but it's our famous, I'm gonna call it the famous trunk or treat Halloween item we have at the park. So those are coming up in the next few months. Also, the park maintenance contract is out to bid. The responses are due July 20th for that. That's a new contract. We also have a new partner program with the First Baptist Church. It'll be ready for August the 1st registration. This is for basketball leagues for U6 to adults beginning on November 11th. That, like I said, that's a brand new program that we're very excited about expanding our recreational activities with other partners. The sister sculpture to grounded growth at Brook Run Park is in progress. It's a 15-foot feature with seating for 16 along a flower petal benches, and the installation is scheduled for the fall of this year. Public Works, we have our public comment period open right now with Happy Hollow Road, also Chamblee Dunwoody Road at Oak Point Place, Dunwoody Club Drive, Perimeter Center East, Peter Road at Equestrian, and Happy Hollow Road. Those comment periods are now open. We have our Dunwoody Road sidewalk, the retaining wall, and is 90%, the retaining walls are complete and 90% of the curb is complete. That project is scheduled to reopen that road in August. We have the county resurfacing, Blunt resumed repaving. We also finished the last segment of the Spalding Drive. If y'all recall, Spalding Drive, we had to shift that time frame to have the stormwater pipe underneath. That's all complete at this point. We still have a little bit of striping to do out there, but other than that, it is done. Georgetown Gateway continues to move along. There will be some traffic delays in that area. Right now, we're trying to put the stormwater pipe under the road. When I say trying, we're doing it, but you have to navigate the traffic is why I use that word trying to do, because we have to do it through the traffic and keep things moving as through that busy section of the city. The ARPA funding stormwater contract construction manager has facilitated rehabilitation over a mile of stormwater pipe in the past year. If y'all recall, that was a large portion of our ARPA money was for stormwater, and that was one of the items that the federal government laid out to be a primary use for that money of the eligible uses within the city of Dunwoody. Also, work is continuing at Campus 244. The footings are going for the new planned Element Hotel. So that site, as y'all know, we've talked about that numerous times in the past, It's a very unique site. I want to bring it to the public's attention. It was the old Gold Kiss site or Cotton States, I think it was originally. And has since now adding 2 floors to that building that are of wood construction, timber construction, and also now the hotel. So very new, what was new and became old is now new again. So the 2023 Household Electronics Recycling Event is scheduled for October 1st at St. Luke's Presbyterian Church. Also, the department has started accepting applications for our 2023 front yard tree planting program. And just so y'all know, that tree planting program it's eligible. We call it a front yard program, but it's where there's right of way. In other words, if you have right of way behind your home, that would still qualify as a front, so to speak. Placemaking within economic development department continues to lead creative placemaking efforts in coordination with other community partners. We have the mural at Ashford Lane. We unveiled the Dunwoody MARTA Station parking deck mural. We have the exhibit at the high school, and also the next item is the installation of the mosaic on the new retaining wall at Shamley, Dunwoody, and Womack. So that's just one of the things that they're doing. They're very creative within that department. Under communications, Dunwoody we're developing a Dunwoody map for hotel guests. This was also for the perimeter workforce. We have designed, put together, and printed and mailed the Summer Dunwoody Digest. That's out. There's a example of it within your report. We also designed and installed placemaker banners in the Dunwoody Village. Those banners will change from time to time with whatever's different items going on in the city. That's a new initiative we did just this year. It's a trial program. Want to see how successful it is. Designed the new Dunwoody Bond election website. This is an informational website. Also the Happy Hollow improvements that I mentioned a moment ago, but we have mailers, yard signs, website, press release, and social post to get the word out for those improvements that are occurring there. And July 4th, last Tuesday, of course, we had our tent set up there for information at the end of the parade. The parade was very unique this year, as many of y'all know. It rained, I think, about 3 minutes after I started it, and I know it rained before some people even started cross the start line. It was very much of a downpour, early morning, summertime thunderstorm, but nonetheless, we did have a very successful parade. I was impressed with how many people stayed along the route throughout the storm. Information technology, our OneDrive program is completed. We also have our park internet request for proposals was posted. The deadline, we did extend the deadline on that to try to get additional interest on that initiative. The police have Coffee with a Cop is scheduled for July 17th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Crema Espresso Gourmet at 2458 Mount Vernon Road. We also did a distracted driving and crosswalk detail on June 21st in the PCID area. There were 26 citations issued, including 10 for hands-free violation, and also 2 people were issued citations for crossing the road, not in a crosswalk. Remember, our ordinance is very detailed. It also puts the responsibility on the pedestrian, not just the one driving a motor vehicle. So there are additional responsibilities within the city of Dunwoody there. As you read through the crime report, many items are in there. Just take a look when you go through it, when you have time. It just gives a detail of items that have occurred within the city. The finance department has the 2022 annual comprehensive financial report was completed and posted to the city's website. There's a link within your report. Also, we've held the first 2 public hearings on the review of the 2023 millage rate. And we have our 3rd meeting, of course, tonight. We have conducted 2 non-for-profit verification audits to review spending of the ARPA funds. The finance staff is working on updating the standard operating procedures as needed with our new software and processes moving forward. That's going under the leadership of Richard. Richard's taken over that department. So he wanted to go through a few things to have some different standards there. The monthly financial report for 2023 can be found at the link within your report. And also additionally, the city's ARPA, and CARES website have been updated with actual spending through the end of May. So all that is up to date, and there are links within the website. Human resources, we did fill our human resources generalist position. The person started a couple of weeks ago in that spot there. And also one thing we're going to have tonight, which is our human resources salary and benefits survey to ensure competitive position and recruitment and retention for retention purposes. So that will be reviewed tonight as well. If there are any comments the council may have on the report, I'm glad to answer those. We have many staff members here as well that can participate.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Eric, I have just one question comment. It looks like we have a lot of paving going on in the city of Dunwoody. We have neighborhood paving and then other projects. I see that the Chamblee Dunwoody at Womack intersection says it's going to be finished later this summer, and that really only is final paving is expected later this summer. It's really just the paving that it sounds like. The school system starts in less than 1 month, literally less than 1 month, 4 weeks from now. I'm hoping that that intersection can be open before the first, start of school, because Womack is extremely busy with school traffic. If you could prioritize or talk to staff, see if it makes any sense to prioritize the Womack, Chamblee, Dunwoody over the neighborhood paving. I don't know if it's all coming out of the same pot of money or the same contractor, but to me, that intersection is a priority. And I just would want to hope that it's the same, that you and staff feel it's a priority as well. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Catherine.
Thanks for the report. Just 2 comments. One is a thank you for the Spalding paving. I'm sure that for efficiency's sake, that was out of order, but it was great to finish that project, and good for the residents. Also, I received good feedback on the banners in the village area, unsolicited. So good job there too. Thank you.
Joe.
So Eric, could you just help explain to the public the Happy Hollow? We're asking for public feedback now, and I'd like to kind of compare against one that's already on our website. We have these different phases when people, for instance, can we kind of talk about this? We started somewhere with a master plan. Somewhere there was a master plan that talked about putting sidewalks on Happy Hollow and adding this complete streets, right? And then, so now we're asking for public input. We don't have any funding set aside to build it yet, right? So can you kind of just let folks know generally what those stages are and approximately how long those stages go from? For this example, do you mind?
Sure.
Thanks.
No, glad to do it. No, and Joe, you're exactly right. Any of these type projects, it takes, they can be in the pipeline for years, frankly. When they starts as an initial concept. It could be through a staff generated, through the council generated, or through the public generated. To have that, it goes into a plan. The plan then becomes, engineering drawings, hopefully provided after the comments are initiated from the citizenry. We have to have some initial engineering drawings to say, hey, this is what it's going to initially look like. Then it goes from there into a public comment phase. And that's part of what we try to really pride ourselves on, is having these different public comment phases open, not only in a hearing like this, but also online and through any kind of media that we can accept. Jennifer and her department do an excellent job on trying to get the word out there, as well as the Public Works Department. And that's how this particular project is occurring. It's going along. Nothing's set in stone. Like you said, the funding isn't all there, different things, but we do want to accept comments to try to get a product that is appropriate for the residents. Sometimes, as y'all know, you get different kind of feedback on projects. They're not always easy, because you have a trail system that may go in. People didn't want it at first, and when it goes in, they love it. And so it's always an interesting debate. I don't envy y'all's, the position y'all have to be in sometimes, because it is difficult, but those decisions are not easy. It's part of what makes a community great, though, to have those public comments, the input sessions, and then end up with a beautiful finished product that people can enjoy. We certainly don't want to build something that somebody does not enjoy.
Right, so thanks, Eric. So I just want to kind of circle back. So this plan on what I'd like folks to understand is that you start with a master concept plan. And this is coming from our transportation plan that was approved in 2017 that talked about adding sidewalks on Happy Hollow and Complete Streets facility. And so from our 2017 master transportation plan, there was a prioritization done. And then you can go to our website, look on the Public Works, and you can see the projects. Now, right now, Happy Hollow is not listed because it's not funded, but we're at the very, very first step of this, and it's called concept design, right?
Right, that's
Concept.
correct.
So we have other further along. So everything you see in any master plan we have, are we going to have a concept? Would we have a concept meeting first and have public engagement first, specifically with every one of those many projects listed in a
Yes,
concept?
that's the goal.
Right,
We try to have
exactly.
plenty of public participation.
Great.
yes.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for your time.
Stacy.
I just have a quick question because I think it's going to be so cool and I can't wait for our citizens to see it. When is the mosaic starting now that the retaining wall is done? Like when do we get to start seeing the pretty?
Right. And I don't know if is Michael Starling here? He was here earlier, but nonetheless, that's, that is that project will be kicking off very soon. I mean, I wish I had an exact date. I don't have I'm sorry. We can get you an exact date. I don't have an exact date, but now that's complete. The Art Commission is going to finalize everything on that. And then that will be coming by the end of the year.
I guess I just want to say to the public, when you're driving on Chamberlain Womack, that retaining wall, you see a part that's cut out. And what we're putting there is public art. It's a really cool piece
Yeah,
and it's going to be a
mosaic.
tile mosaic. And I personally can't wait to see it, which is why
I
I'm
get time.
right. Really want to know when it's going to get started. It's just something that we're cool that we're adding to the city.
I have a question for Chief, please. Eric, thank you for this report. And while he's coming up, for those of you who probably aren't aware, the city Parks Department sponsors, there's an extra movie in July, but normally it's the first Friday in the summer for movies and the second Saturday for concerts. And because of the calendar this month, they were both this weekend. And our Parks Department had two really big events. I would say we saw 2,500 easily to 3,000 people at the two events. And it was a lot. And I'm very appreciative, Eric, that they pulled them off seamlessly, even with a little rain, because apparently this was the week of rain. But I appreciate that. So Chief, in the report, there were under police, there were multiple references to we did not pursue. And I think it's worth explaining to anyone who might have read the report why that is and what technologies we're using and et cetera. So the floor is yours.
Sure, I'll be happy to explain that. So we have like a lot of agencies in our area, have a limited chase policy. And so for serious crimes, we'll chase someone. So for instance, they killed somebody, shot somebody, more serious crimes. But for minor traffic offenses, like they ran a red light or were speeding, we don't chase them. And we don't chase them for a lot of reasons, mainly of which I don't want to see any of our officers injured over such a minor traffic offense. In addition to that, there's some liability issues when you chase someone of innocent people being killed or injured because of a crash. And so for that reason, we have that policy. Now, a lot of times we have their tag numbers, so we're able to figure out who they are later and charge them. Sometimes there might be in a stolen car and we may not be able to figure out who it is, but that's why we have that policy in place. And we have, probably 4 or 5 a month that seem to not want to stop for something that we pulled them over for.
And our license plate readers that are throughout the city, do we use those pretty regularly?
Oh, we do.
Every day.
The LPRs help us immensely, both in catching people sometimes before they commit crimes, if they're wanted and they come into the city or they're in a stolen car or have a stolen tag. But also after crimes have been committed, we're able to sometimes identify suspects because of the license plate readers.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions for anyone? Thank you. And we are on to Richard's. No, not yet. We'll do it after. The presentation of the comprehensive
Yes.
annual financial report. Thank you.
Yes. So I'm here to introduce Adam Fraley. He is a partner with Malden and Jenkins, our external auditors, and he's going to go through a presentation tonight, a brief presentation of how the audit is and our financial statements for fiscal year 2022. So let me see if I can pull this up. There we go. Okay. Page down. So Adam will come up and speak. Thank you. Thank you.
Make sure you speak into the microphone, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. How's everybody? I'm Adam Fraley. I'm a partner with Malden and Jenkins, and I'm incredibly appreciative that Richard got up here before me to handle all the technical stuff. But I am here tonight to present the audit to the city for the year ended December 31st, 2022. And hopefully I can navigate this so that all the good folks can see. So just real quick, the first page here, I'm gonna start on page 2. Well, first of all, in your packets, I know you should have the annual comprehensive financial report that is the city's financial statements that they prepare annually. And then also this audit discussion analysis, and I'm gonna pretty much stick to this AD&A, I'll call it, because it hits the highlights of the audit, a little bit of the numbers, the highlights of the year-end results, and that sort of thing. On page 2 here, this is just, some information about Malden and Jenkins. We're a full service CPA firm, but we've got a specialty niche that we really focus in state and local governments. And we do a lot of them. And so you see there, we serve over 650 state and local governments throughout the Southeast and beyond even, most of those in Georgia. I was the engagement partner. You had Josh Carroll, who was also the engagement director. And then with any audit of the city of the size of the city of Dunwoody, we also have a quality control partner that is independent of the actual engagement team, do a review of the file and the ultimate financial reports. And that was James Spence for this year. So regarding the audit opinion, the city's financial statements are the responsibility of the city to annually, in accordance with law, state of Georgia law, put together those set of statements and have those audited by an independent CPA. The city did prepare the statements for our audit and provided all the financial matters, financial data for us to do that audit. We did, as you see on page 3 there, we did consider the internal control structure of the city. We have to assess internal controls to determine our audit plan and how those may affect the transactions and the reporting of those transactions for the year. We did conduct our audit in accordance with jury accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. And at the end of the day, when we were done with our audit work and procedures, we issued an unmodified audit opinion. We oftentimes call that a clean opinion. What that means is that based on our test work, we feel that the financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022 are fairly presented in all material respects. This doesn't give absolute assurance. The audit is not designed to do that, but it does provide reasonable assurance that these financial statements are materially correct. On the next page, I mentioned government auditing standards. We did issue our opinion in accordance with government auditing standards as well. And we also issued an opinion in accordance with the Uniform Guidance for the Single Audit Act. As part of the single audit, we did perform compliance and internal control testing related to the highway planning construction cluster and also the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery program that the city had federal expenditures pertaining to. At the bottom of page 4 there, you'll see some of the audit scopes and procedures, high level, that we did do as part of the audit. And then on page 5, this goes into our required communications. I'm not going to touch on each one of these. We are required to communicate them as part of the end of the audit, but I will just touch on just a couple here. So on page 6, it asks whether, having to do with, whether we had any disagreements or difficulties in performing the audit or disagreements with management. I'm happy to say that we didn't have any such disagreements or difficulties in the audit process. Richard and the entire finance staff and those even outside of finance that we had to obtain information from were completely, cooperative in getting us everything we need in a timely fashion to make sure that these financial statements were issued and to the state of Georgia in accordance with state law. And also to GFOA for the consideration in their awards program as well. We did have some audit adjustments. They're reflected in the annual comprehensive financial report. And then at the bottom of page 7, auditor independence. I always want to touch on this because it really is the cornerstone of what we do. We have to maintain independence. We are independent of the city of Dunwoody and the entire reporting structure, including its component units. And so it's important that we maintain that and that y'all get an independent audit. Okay, on page 8, you'll see there a 5-year history. This is of the unassigned fund balance and its ratio as compared to expenditures for the general fund. Of course, the general fund is the main operating fund of the city, and you'll see how that's fluctuated over the last 5 years. It is higher this year. Couple things about the city of Dunwoody, and actually I'm gonna hold my tongue on that a little bit to the next page. One thing about city of Dunwoody is, property taxes. Property taxes are typically done in the fall. And so being a December 31 year end, that does help fund balance, but those property taxes are to be used over the next several months, even beyond December 31st. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at fund balance, which is the reserves for the general fund. And then on the next page, you'll see there a comparison of, on page 9, a comparison of revenues versus expenditures. Again, that's over the last 5 years as well. And you'll see a pretty big difference between the revenues for the general fund this year and the expenditures. And that's really not due to so much of a change in the revenues, but a decrease in the expenditures due to public safety salaries being moved into the ARPA fund for eligible expenditures under that ARPA program. And, in the state of Georgia, under the Uniform Chart of Accounts requires a separate ARPA fund as a special revenue fund in the GAAP set of statements. And then on the next page, this is just a little pie chart there of the general fund sources, revenue sources that is. And so you'll see there, taxes being one of the largest as part of the makeup of the revenues. And then you'll see a 5-year trend on the next page 11 of taxes, as well as the other revenues for the city. And then also the other revenues and how they've behaved, including license permits, charges for services, et cetera, fines and forfeitures. And then finally, on page 12, you'll see a similar pie chart related to the general fund's expenditures. And again, you'll note there that the smallest slice of the pie there was a public safety expenditures. And of course, those were reported in the ARPA fund. As part of the audit, I'm happy to report that we didn't have any findings that the auditing standards required us to cite as far as a significant deficiency or a material weakness. But we did have one thing that we often call a management point. You'll see that here on page 13. And it's related to the liability the city reports related to compensated absences. The city does report that liability and correctly reported the liability, with the exception of including the FICA portion, payroll taxes in that liability, which to properly reflect that. It was immaterial, but something that we cite as a management point. So it's just kind of a byproduct of the audit as just a, something where, the processes can be strengthened a little bit there. And then finally, so obviously we did perform the audit for the city. We also have our government advisory services, should anyone on council ever be interested in any of that. So I won't go over it, but we have that information there if the city has a need. And then we also, our cybersecurity department that performs those type procedures and that type services for local governments as well. The rest of the document, starting on page 16, is new GASB pronouncements. GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, is a standard setting body for local governments. And we always want to keep people ahead of the curve when it comes to the new standards that are coming down the pipeline. The city did implement this year GASB 87 related to leases. So when you look at the financial statements, you'll see a change related to implementing that new standard. Similar to that standard, the big one for next year is GASB 96, and it's very similar to leases, except it applies to subscription-based IT arrangements. And so, I know the city's working on that to, again, implement that next year, just like the city implemented GASB 87 this year. And that concludes my presentation, but I'd happy to be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions, anybody? John?
Thank you for the presentation. Much appreciated. And I know you've gone through this in great detail. I see a lot of talk of the general fund, but I also heard you mention the ARPA, and I'm taking for granted the ARPA is multi-million-dollar federal funding for funding replacements, things of that nature. Was your audit very thorough in the sense of the use of that ARPA funding? Have you checked that aspect of the financials to make sure that we're following federal law? I'd hate to find out later that the city did anything out of the ordinary and we'd have to pay back $10 million or something from that realm. Was your audit consisting of that fund as well? And how did it
It
look?
is. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. So the single audit that I mentioned, that's an audit of the federal awards. And, we have to go through what the federal government calls kind of the risk-based approach for determining the major programs, which ARPA would be a program. And it was one of the programs that we tested as part of our single audit. So that's both compliance and internal control testing related to that, and issued our opinion. And it was an unmodified opinion as well.
And so it looked all right. It looked okay from that perspective. All right. And I saw that the general fund monies were then taken out of ARPA, and we looked a little better in the sense of but in reality, moving forward, the 5 years in the past and more than likely the 5 years in the future, that's going to be a blip that's in there forever. I mean, we're not going to have that money for the same reasons next year. So it's just interesting that the financial aspects force you to do it when in reality, it's going to be a blip forever.
A little bit of preaching to the choir. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things, just state law with the Uniform Chart of Accounts. They want to see a separate fund for it.
All right. So we didn't do it because we wanted to look better. We did it because of
That's
accounting
right.
law.
That's right.
Thank you. That's all I had. I appreciate your service.
Yes, sir.
Joe?
I see on your slides, they have appendices of your services. You talk about cyber. Was that part of the scope of doing a cyber audit?
No, sir. No, sir.
I'll get with our city staff after that. All right, thank you.
I want to make sure, this probably is not a question for you. It might be a question for Richard or Jay about the way it sounds is that we wouldn't have had the money to pay the police because I'm afraid people might interpret it that way with the language about moving it to the police, moving it to the ARPA monies. Jay, would you like to come and explain that, please, for the public? I appreciate it.
Here's the best way to do it. And they have done everything that they're supposed to do with the audit and did it in the correct way.
Right.
The weird quirk about the ARP funding is this council chose to take that money and basically pay for police salaries in 1 year, but then use that money that they would have used for police salaries to set up ARP2, which removes the federal strings from it. In most grants, this would not be permissible, but it was permissible under this one. However, in our case, we have to show the expenses in the ARP fund for our entire humanity life here as a city, and then show the others as separate. So unfortunately, it does convolute things, but in no way did this city run continuing operations using ARP money.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Attorney, before I hear a motion on removing item number 5, do you want to give the motion maker, whomever that's going to be, some guidance?
Sure. The city manager and staff's request is that item 5 be withdrawn without prejudice. If and when it's brought back, it'll be re-advertised, so it'll be fully transparent to the public.
Okay. So the motion needs to be just to remove item
Withdraw without
prejudice. Okay. Because this item, in order to amend the agenda, I need a motion, please.
Move
ahead.
to amend the agenda to remove item number 5 without prejudice.
That's fine.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilman Seconder and seconded by Councilwoman Harris. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously of all those present. Thank you. And then Sharon, I think you have to read the next one, correct? I will wait.
And under item number 4, public hearing, we have a resolution of the mayor and council of the city of Dunwoody, Georgia, to fix the ad valorem tax rate of the city of Dunwoody for fiscal year 2023 and for other purposes.
Council members, what you have before you tonight is the final adoption of the 2023 millage rate combined with public hearing, which will be the final of 3 public hearings on it. To give everyone the order that it will happen in, we'll do a brief presentation, which everyone has. It's basically the same one. It's slightly updated from the last one, and then open the floor up for the required public comment and then discussion and or vote by council. We'll go with that. If you could pull up the presentation. All right, beat me to it. First, before we even get started, I just want to say this from the get-go. Generally, a homeowner is entitled to a homestead exemption on their home and land underneath, provided the home was owned by the homeowner and was their legal resident as of January 1st of the taxable year. Wanted to pull the code. Basically, if your primary residence in Georgia was in Dunwoody, your taxes get frozen for Dunwoody purposes. And when we run the numbers here, 85% of those residences have applied and have been approved for it. Places that wouldn't be approved for this exemption, which we're going to see in a little bit, freezes your taxes, would be second homes or rental homes. So in that case, basically, even though we're doing a public hearing of increasing taxes, 85% of the residents will see no increase whatsoever. So first, let's go through why public hearings. Basically, state law says do this math. If you gain a little bit of revenue from your taxes from the property values going up, and this includes commercial, you have to advertise a tax increase unless you actually reduce the tax rate. So ours goes up a slight percentage according to this rule, even though the rate the city charges the same and 85% of residential home values are the same. So those bills aren't going up, but we're required to advertise this and do our public hearings we're doing today. This is a step of all the different steps in the law, as far as we have to advertise that there's a notice of tax increases. We actually have to do a press release. And I will want to say one of the things that was kind of unique, I think we were the first city in Metro Atlanta to release a press release this time, which taught me never to be the first. Everybody started calling us, why are you doing this? And it's like, everybody's going to do it. And now they call me, yeah, we figured that out 2 months later. And then now we're to the final part of this, is holding the final public hearing adoption of the millage rate today. Now here's the nitty gritty. The tax rate for a city of Dunwoody for municipal operations is 3.04 mils. That means 3 mils charged for every $1,000 of assessable value. For your typical Dunwoody home, that's $296 a year. For your typical Dunwoody home, they pay 81 cents in taxes a day. 81 cents in taxes a day. Just let that sink in for a second, how small that number is in the big scheme of things. Remember, this is the city portion, not the school nor the county. That's why I want to show this next chart. This takes the county amount, which there are some services that the county operates here. Fire is part of it. There's general operations. The school portion, which the school system runs, Decatur's a little bit different, as you can tell in the chart, and the city part. If you add all those 3 together, you get the real tax rate burden. Dunwoody's aggregate rate is the lowest of all DeKalb County cities. The other thing it does not mention, because it's a little bit different for us and Doraville, is both of those cities roll back taxes 1 mil for their residents. So not only is Dunwoody's aggregate rate the lowest at 39.233, it's really 38.233 for most residents. Now, this just is the typical tax bill and how it looks. And we've gone through the calculations at a few of the other public hearings. People brought their assessments. We walked them through them individually. And most of them, when they saw their increases, the increase was on the school portion, because the schools do not freeze your property taxes. The city and the county do both here. So both of those 2 amounts would be frozen from year to year unless you actually physically improved your property. And no matter what, you can slice it different ways. The lion's share of what you actually pay your tax bill at the end of the year goes to the school system. The city portion is below, we're looking at, depending upon which way you calculate it, 5 to 6% for city operations. A lot of homeowners association dues are less than what you pay in city taxes. Why two charts? This will be something for discussion in the near future. There is a thing called the e-host. The previous program we had called the host forgave property taxes. When citizens approved SPLOST, they also approved the e-host. What this does is it says, take an extra penny of sales tax and reduce property taxes, but first do the county general fund and the county hospital fund, which pays for its Grady supplement. Those have been receiving 100% reduction for the past 2 years. We expect in the next year or two that to possibly trickle down to the next tier, which would be the city. Now, we cannot guarantee that. It has more to do with the way the county works through their operations. But right now we want to start showing this because at some point in time, the city may be eligible for this funding. Now, we're going to stop for a second. Everybody hears that there are bonds. Why aren't we talking about bonds on this? Bonds are a topic that's there. The reason the city has placed on the agenda in November a resolution for the public to vote on concerning approval of GO bond debt. In other words, issuing debt to build things. Even if if the voters approve it in November, the soonest bonds could be sold would be February of next year, which means that the taxes for that would not even affect anything until 2024 at the earliest. So they are not in play here. The voters have to weigh in first before anything else happens. Now let's talk a little bit more about freezing taxes. Basically, as we said at the very beginning, 85% of the residents, which is about normal for a city of our size with rental properties, transitory properties, and second homes, have frozen taxes for purposes of city and for county. So for your fire part and your, for here, just for the fire part, because general is forgiven this year. All of those people, even if their house value went up 100%, would see no increase in city taxes. Now, let's use a little bit of this to talk about a health checkup for the city. As you can tell here, this is the percent year over year change in the digest. This is the bread and butter of city revenue. Now, as you can tell, it's not going to be perfectly linear. We're going to have things like the Great Recession, and that's the value dips in 2011 and 2012. We saw a little bit of dip in 2020, but that had more to do with a lawsuit from a previous year that went through the court system. So in some of the bigger gains, it kind of washes that out. But we've had 3 years of net growth of 6%. Now, that's great. That is great. Now, we also have to go to the next chart. Look at it linearly. Okay, so going in a straight line over this, you see how it goes up. Does it go up each year? No, and that's part of why the city is wisened to build a reserve fund as long as it has. That way, in case it ever dips, the city is ready to dip into the reserves, which we have not had to do since COVID started, and use that for operations. So the city has been able to go on its normal path without reducing operations. Now, let's stop here. One of the things that Malden and Jenkins staff brought up, and council asked about it, was there's a slight problem with how are things reported? You're running a deficit, you're not running a deficit. The audit itself showed that we were not running a deficit for 2022. It's state clear. They do agreed, and he stated it, that we had to show the expenses for the police fund in a different source. So what we did was we actually went through the other day, this chart, this chart right here, which is to show the math involved in it, okay? And what I want to do with this is go through what we did and then talk a little bit about it. I want to take, this is the full detail at the lower level, but to keep it simple, going left to right, the far left column is what is actually shown in the audit. Those numbers are straight from the audit. The next thing we had to do was add in what is called ARP1. This was the $10 million used to pay for police salaries. Now, from a budgetary perspective, we didn't spend it on that. We spent it on a transfer into an entity called ARP2. So in the budget world, it's a wash. Basically, the city council said, look, we can do it. It removes the strings. It's the perfect thing. It also removed the time restrictions on it. So there's no, there is still some money we do have to spend by a certain deadline, but most of it is no longer tied to that. Then we also had to take out that money to show the true thing. Almost all of the expenses in ARP2 and CARES 2 fall under one-time expenditures, or in some cases, what we're doing is trying pilot programs out Pilot programs are not necessarily the thing you want to, use a windfall to test it out, run it for a few years, and we've decided in a few instances to work with it that way. Once you get to that, then you get to the final real true expenditures. So the city started up with 25 million in the bank, earned about 32 million, spent about 29.9, which means its raw gain or use of fund balance was 2.26 million. That was the raw amount it gained, removing the federal funding out of it. That money is actually a little bit higher when we talk about the structural, because 2 million of that expenditure was the donations for expansions of the Art Center and the Nature Center. They're one-time expenditures. So in essence, the city ran a very healthy operation in 2022. And at the end of the year, once you remove certain restricted funds for it, we're left with 23.9 million of unreserved fund balance, which is around the 9-month level. Policy for a minimum is 4. So very healthy. What it allows the city to do is very comfortably keep things moving and make sure that we don't get overly zealous with revenue projections. Now, let's talk a little bit about that spending though, and back up to this. One of the things I want to talk about, because we're going to bring it back up later in the meeting as a discussion item, is compensation. Now, one of the things that's happening is where is been the emphasis of spending for the past few years with the city? If you take a look here, here's a chart which indexes everything compared to inflation. Inflation itself, we're taking the year before COVID, the year before inflation became a topic again, as year 0. And from there, if you've gone forward to 2023, inflation has run at about 20%. Now you hear different numbers, but this is the aggregate compounded rate since then. The city has had to be competitive in police officer and detective pay. During that time, there have been different adjustments. We have adopted the grid system. We've adopted other different pay things for other issues, and that pay has increased about 41%. So as far as the city council's efforts, when additional money from that earlier chart where we saw 6% growth 3 years in a row, that money's focus has been on retaining police officers. I mean, that's where the city has put its emphasis on general fund taxes. Some other final parts I just like to put about the digest is this is your net digest. So in other words, who is paying what as far as property taxes are concerned? If you take a look, commercial real property is about 62% and residential 33%. That is because of the freeze and the 1 mil exemption. The actual value is closer to 50-50. But that exemption makes it so commercial pays a little bit more of the burden. And as you can tell, the other slivers, motor vehicle, public utility, personal property is just a very smidgen part of it. Now, this is the last part we want to show on this is the exemptions of Dunwoody. There are 4 major exemptions, one for a category where both age and disability, that's a very small percent, about $22 million worth of exemption. Every homesteaded property gets a $10,000 exemption, so that's about 7%. But the 2 biggest exemptions we have are the freeze, which exempted $685 million worth of value, and the 1 mil exemption, which exempted $593 million. We are at the process in the city where $1 million worth of property is not taxed at the very beginning. We're at $1 billion. And that's to bring up a point that part that we showed earlier of about every home in Dunwoody, about 20% of their value is already taken off the table as far as taxation is concerned. Next steps, this is the same list you've seen. You've seen the presentation before. Proper procedure would be to open up the floor for public comment, and then it is council's discretion after that.
Thank you. And with that, I will open the floor for the public hearing unless I see an objection. Seeing no objection, the floor is open. We will have 10 minutes for each side. We will start with those in favor of essentially, I'm not sure if there's something legally I'm supposed to say because it's a little confusing, but the millage rate is staying the same. Is that pretty accurate?
No jurisdiction in Georgia has been able to make this fit any rule.
Okay.
Just in favor or not in favor.
Favor and not a favor. So we'll start with 10 minutes in favor of the report, the millage rate. All right, seeing none. If anyone wants to speak, you can, in this case, you don't have to have a card. You can just stand up and line up in the center and approach the microphone. All right, so I'll do the 10 minutes in favor. Okay, seeing none. 10 minutes opposed. Okay, also seeing none. With that, unless there's an objection, I will close the public hearing. The public hearing is closed. And now it's up to council members for discussion or questions. Catherine, you have anything? Anybody? All good. Just for those of you who may be new, this is the third time this is our third public hearing. And so we've discussed this with lots of advertised, and we've discussed it multiple times. So just to be clear, in 2022, we did not use any of our reserves.
That is correct.
And at the moment, I don't know that it was in this report. Never mind. We didn't cover the current level of reserves.
At current level, you will have another item later on. In the
Right,
meeting.
that's what I thought. Okay. Okay.
Won't steal his thunder on that one.
Right. Okay. All right. So with that, I think this is an action item to just
Move to adopt.
moved by Councilman Hennigan,
Again,
second by Councilman Seconder. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously of those who are here.
Thank y'all very
Thank
much.
you.
Mayor, the next item on the agenda, item number 5 was withdrawn. Item number 6 is an ordinance to amend chapter 27 zoning ordinance of the city of Dunwoody Code of Ordinances to define medical cannabis dispensary uses and create use regulations for such uses.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This is a text amendment for medical cannabis dispensaries to create regulations and include them into our zoning ordinance and into our use tables for our districts. I want to quickly go over the state regulations on this. We're dealing with a law, like a state law from 2019, Georgia's HOPE Act, that allows for the production, distribution, and dispensing of low THC oil. So not all types of cannabis, but just low THC oil to registered patients. It establishes 2 pathways to legally dispense medical cannabis. One of them we're addressing tonight. This is for dedicated dispensaries that's regulated through the Georgia Access to Medical Cannabis Commission. They have issued by now, they've issued 2 licenses for 5 dispensaries each. They'll eventually issue 6 licenses for a total of 30 dispensaries statewide. This is all just like the current status, and this may change in the future. And this is what we're addressing tonight. So it's for dedicated dispensaries. There also will be a second pathway, which is for pharmacies that's regulated through the State Board of Pharmacy. This is not ready to move forward yet. They've been talking about it this year, but we have nothing as of 2023 to discuss on this yet. The state regulations have minimum distance requirement from certain users. That's like 1,000 feet from public or private schools, early care or education programs, and places of worship. So that's in state law. We have to be at least as protective as this. So even if we wanted to, we couldn't go lower than this. Local governments are specifically authorized to use the zoning powers to regulate this use based on local needs. So we can create additional regulations. So we can be stricter than the state law. And the current status as of right now is the 2 licensees. It's one company is called True Leaf. The other one is called Botanical Sciences. True Leaf has opened the first 3 locations, one of them in Marietta, one of them in Macon, one of them in Pooler, and Botanical Sciences has not issued or has not opened any locations yet. And this for you all and for the public too, to differentiate what we're talking about. This is not for recreational cannabis. So this is not for to get high or like for some type of recreational use. This is specifically only for medical purposes. One big difference is that this is low THC oil that has an active ingredient of no more, an active ingredient percentage of no more than 5% of THC content. The THC is the active ingredient in cannabis. For comparison, recreational cannabis and what you can buy in other states often is 19% or more. So it's the dosage is lower than what you can buy on the street or in other states. Requires a medical doctor's consultation and requires registration with the state. And in Georgia, that's only eligible, only 17 specific medical conditions are eligible. So it's also different from other states where a doctor can prescribe it based on their assessment. In Georgia, it's only for 17 specific conditions, and those are all fairly severe conditions. We're not anticipating that this will have major repercussions sort of on the legal market. So it's like the good and the bad. Like Georgia, this is a relatively sort of cautious entrance sort of into the world of cannabis. And so even in Massachusetts, I have an example here, approximately 68% of the total cannabis sales are on the illegal market. In Georgia, we anticipate that to be similar or higher. So this may not eliminate sort of the illegal market on this, but at the same time, this will reduce sort of the impact of these dispensaries as well. And then just like I want to bring up this chart here of where it's standing in the nation. You have in dark green the states that have legalized recreational and medical cannabis. In light green, you have states that have legalized medical cannabis. So it's in Alabama and Florida, it's legal at the moment. Due to the low percentage of the active ingredient in the Georgia product, it's often not even considered sort of a real medical cannabis. It's often considered or classified still as CBD because, again, like the ingredient is relatively low. So it's not considered a full-fledged medical cannabis program by some. We wanted to see what the impacts were of these types of facilities. So we reached out to our neighbors to the south. We reached out to a couple of municipalities there, received feedback. It's been legal in Florida since 2014, so it had a bit of time to settle there and time for the municipalities to to get feedback on it. Overall, the rules are more permissive in Florida, so the impacts are presumably higher as well. The locations, the type of locations that facilities in Florida are seeking are typically between 2,000 and 5,000 square feet. So they're typical retail suites and shopping centers. Often they're in inline suites in shopping centers, but they can also occupy freestanding former sort of retail or restaurant buildings. Traffic impact is not out of the ordinary. It's not higher or lower than for other retail users. And none of the people we talked with reported any sort of negative impacts, no reported nuisances. And we went out to the location in Marietta that opened up a couple months ago. So they're also in a shopping center on Cobb Parkway. And they have an N suite there, so it's approximately 4,000 square feet, I think. So like in a typical shopping center, relatively unobtrusive. From a regulatory standpoint, so the state of Georgia has decided that medical cannabis is a valuable medical resource to the residents. So now it's on us to identify how we want to make that product sort of available to residents in the city. We're sort of because we have this relatively hard cap right now of only 30 locations. So if we have regulations that are very stringent, they may just like not come to Dunwoody, but go to Sandy Springs or Brookhaven due to just the low number of licenses that exist statewide. Again, we had relatively few negative impacts, and then we're recommending to you all tonight to regulate it as a permitted use. We looked at it, regulating it as a special use too, and requiring a special land use permit. We're not recommending that because the locations these facilities are going into are relatively standard. There isn't a lot that differentiates them in terms of opening hours or impacts from other retail users, which is what we typically would look for as part of a special land use permit. We're proposing to allow these uses in the typical retail districts. So we have OCR, NS, C1, CR1, C2, and then the perimeter center and Dunwoody Village districts. So those are the same districts we allow other retail users. And then we have included the state law requirements because those are mandatory. So those apply either way. And I have, for comparison, I have included here the distance requirements we have for packaged liquor stores. So like the state requirements are slightly more strict. So they have higher distance requirements than we do for liquor stores. And what we're proposing tonight is sort of an anti-clustering requirement where each medical cannabis dispensary would have to be located from another medical cannabis dispensary by 2 miles. And this is sort of as the crow flies in a direct line from lot line to lot line. And that's out of an abundance of caution, sort of to test these new land uses and to make sure sort of it does two things. A, it prevents them from sort of, opening up around an intersection, but also it would spread it out amongst the different neighborhoods in the city. And then we're proposing language that prevents consumption on the premises there so that people can purchase the cannabis oil but can't consume it on site. We have included as part of the package sort of a series of maps, and we've done some locational analysis that shows what all these regulations would do. I can go through those in a bit more detail or zoom in if you all have any questions. But that shows the clustering, like it shows the 2 mile radius around some hypothetical locations. Planning Commission has heard this last month, and they've recommended approval 4-3. So we had 4 planning commissioners that recommended it as it's written now, and then 3 commissioners would have recommended the use also, but proposed to either reduce or eliminate the clustering requirement. So they recommended providing these uses, but reduce the 2 mile requirement. And with this, I'm ready to answer any question you may have.
Okay, this is a public hearing. And so we will follow the same procedures we just did. We will have 10 minutes in support of the ordinance, and then 10 minutes opposed. And of course, if you just have a comment that's generic, you can come up at either section and make your comment. So first, 10 minutes for, or line up in the middle. Oh, I have to open the public hearing. I'm sorry. I'm opening the public hearing unless there's an objection. Seeing no objection, the public hearing is open. Now, if there are 10 minutes for, or if you just have a generic comment on this proposed ordinance, you can join us in the center and then the microphone. Okay, seeing none, 10 minutes opposed. Same process, just line up in the middle. All right, also seeing none. With that, I'll close the public hearing unless there's an objection. And council, questions or concerns? I guess this is a city ordinance, so Paul, you'll come back up because it's pretty much you unless somebody has a question for somebody else. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Paul, for the presentation. A couple of questions. I guess the Planning Commission, can you bring up the slide with all the pretty blue dots around the neighborhoods and the schools? the blue dots, that's the 600 feet. Is that right? Near
1,000.
churches?
1,000.
It's 1,000 feet.
That's 1,000 feet. And that's the state law is the, right,
Correct.
it's ours that has the 600 for the alcohol. I get it, never
Yes.
mind. So that's 1,000 feet. So the right there, there can be no stores in those locations.
Correct.
The planning commission voted to approve as is 4-3. The three people wanted the 2-mile reduction taken away. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Again, I'm looking at this is medical. This is medicine that people need for 7 very serious medical conditions. I actually have a letter off to a physician, a technical expert in one of those 17 medical specialties. I wanted his medical opinion based on our legislative decision on a medical issue. I want to know what the medical community thinks of our regulating medical items, because for me, I think it should be in every CVS. But let me get back to that. It is allowed in every CVS, right? Or is that what state law is talking about?
So it hypothetically may be, like they're
Maybe.
working right now on fleshing out those regulations for pharmacies. So it's anticipated that it'll be available in pharmacies in some shape or form.
Right.
And then our regulations right now are just for dedicated dispensaries.
And these dedicated dispensaries, state law is only allowing 30 of those statewide. So more than likely, they're going to be spread geographically throughout the state to some respect. It's just a matter of how many of them may come to Dunwoody. And now we're looking to see where they're appropriate. And I'm guessing based on this blue map again, there's really only commercial districts would have to be in those commercial districts that are outside the blue lines.
Yeah, correct. So hypothetically, by the zoning district, it's allowed in the village, but because of the large number of protective uses, so
Right.
churches or daycare centers, there isn't even a single location in the village.
Correct. And when we look at the PCID area, there might be a way to squeeze in 2 if they're on the exact corners of that 2-mile district, but in reality, somebody's going to throw something at the mall and there's only going to be able to get 1 over there anyway. So, and then you start looking at the other ones. You got the Georgetown 1 mile, you couldn't have, it'd be hard to put anything real close in the Georgetown community, or if you could, you'd put 1 there. And if the requirement was 1 mile, it would be hard to then put it anywhere else. In the
Correct.
Georgetown, you look
Yeah,
at some of the others, it's the same thing. If it was a reduction from 2 miles down, I'm not sure you could squeeze in many more individual dispensaries, right? I'm just trying to look at it from
Yeah,
that
correct.
perspective.
The biggest difference would be in perimeter center. In many other districts, just a single parcel. In perimeter center, that would be the biggest difference. If you reduce it down to 1 mile, you might get 3 or 4 different locations, depending on how they're situated. Yeah.
And again, we're really looking at this from a medical perspective. I don't care where it is, put it in every CVS, but I guess what we're also looking at in the back of our minds is that at some point, our state legislative body may legalize recreational use. Is that part of this discussion? Is this why we are looking at this a little closer than just from a medical perspective?
No, we've written sort of our local regulation to just reference that specific state law that has to do with medical cannabis, and
Right.
we worded it in a way that, like anything that would be recreational, should it happen, would have to be approved through you all separately.
All right. I guess I understand what's happening. I'm in favor of approving this. I may be in favor of reducing that 2-mile, limit, because again, based on what I'm seeing, even down to 1 mile, I'm not sure it allows too many extra of them. But again, I'm just trying to understand, what I'm looking at. Again, we're talking medical necessity, and I'm really hoping I get a letter back from a medical professional that deals with one of those 17 medical specialties on what his patients need and how to get them the access to the medication that their bodies need so they can have a successful day-to-day activities. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Anybody else? So, okay, go ahead.
I'd support what John is referring to, and I'd like to find out where that came from, that 2-mile distance restriction. Where did that come from? How did you come up with that?
So we looked at a bunch of different, dimensions. So that's why we showed like the 1 mile here, the 1.5 mile and the 2 mile. So we thought that it could be desirable to have them available in the different areas of the city. So we didn't want to make it large enough that they would preclude one another. So we wouldn't recommend going for more than 2 miles for that reason. And then anything less than 2 miles wouldn't, perimeter center is the one that where it has the biggest impact. It would allow like 3, 4, 5. So like if you really wanted to sort of ease into this, then the 2 mile would be the one that limits the total number of locations.
And just to clarify, because the legend's really small for me to read this print, but I understand the overlay here and the dots, but right now today, could something go in the village or is that not at all?
Because of state law, it can't.
That's state law.
Yeah.
That's state law. Yeah. Versus a pharmacy, that's another story. Interesting. Okay.
Catherine. Oh, sorry.
I'm back on the clustering as well. 2 miles is, what have you seen? Are you seeing that distance in Florida regulations for the ones that you looked at?
So we have in some states, the way it was rolled out, Georgia has a very conservative rollout, but they could, and they're talking about it because there's existing lawsuits and so forth, to increase the number of total licenses. So that could credibly happen at some point. There's in some states, Oklahoma is a good example, where it was very liberal, the rollout. You have that in small towns, you have on every corner of the intersection, you have a dispensary here that of course you could prevent with less than 2 miles. So you do have, occasionally you have these, you do have distancing requirements. You also have in some places a maximum number of total like businesses in the city. That's a different way to get at it, or like in some areas it's a certain number per 1,000 people, so 1 per 5,000 or something like that exists too. So those are fairly common.
But you think this industry, you think we should have a restriction of some sort, whether it's a measure by distance or a number in the city?
That would be because it's new, like it's like the federal status is still, it's still not fully clarified. That would be sort of the conservative approach to this would be to allow it to happen, but don't, just free willingly create a large number of those facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Couple kind of questions, clarifications on that it can't be within 1,000 feet of public or private school, early care or education program, places of worship. What happens if a store comes in, but then in the same shopping mall, a daycare center opens?
And that doesn't impact the dispensary. So that would be so because it's existing at the time,
Okay.
it has sort of grandfather status,
So-
and it can continue to operate.
So then my next kind of question is, do we have a definition in our code to define the early care, childhood and education or places of worship? I'm just thinking like in the Walmart shopping center, it abuts single family residential that could theoretically have an in-home daycare. So yeah, does that, you guys have to keep know that or?
We're tracking this as good as we can through our business licensing system. So like technically every business in the city is supposed to have, or like every entity, even nonprofits, are having a business license. That's what we're using, and that's what we use to create this map. Yeah.
I'm okay with the 2 miles because we can always change it. If there's only 30 in a state, what continues to concern me and what may make Dunwoody a no location, and I'm okay with this, is that we have not yet we've not yet seen an example of one of these where the windows are not fully covered. And we don't allow that. And our police department, I don't want to speak for them, but they believe that they should be able to see into a business for security reasons, I believe. And so, and that is not, you can't get a variance for that either, right? We don't vary.
So it's in some districts, the windows are ought to be kept clear. In other districts, that's not a
Oh,
requirement.
okay.
And then there's a difference between operable window treatments and non-operable. So in the districts where we don't allow the windows to be covered,
Mhm.
we wouldn't allow it for these uses either. So they can't put drywall in front of it, or they can't install something
okay.
permanently. But they could hypothetically just put the blinds down and.
Okay. All right. Okay. And we know that one is opened in Marietta, one is opening in Brookhaven. I'm gonna presume that a chunk of these 30 will be in Metro Atlanta and a chunk will be in the other 145 counties across the state. I say we try it with the current regulations, and then if we need to make changes, we can. And also, I would presume, though this map is, did you look at what's in Sandy Springs? So like in Sandy Springs, on the other side of High Street is a daycare center. Is that figured in here?
So it would be sort of, so
Okay.
we would require that similar to liquor stores,
Mhm.
submitted as part of an application. And then we would check that for the
Okay.
applications too.
All right. All right. Well, anybody else have any questions or comments or concerns? Thank you. This will be 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
This will come back in 4 weeks.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you in August. Next is consent. Does anybody have any questions or comments on anything on consent?
Move to approve.
Moved by Councilman Hennigan. Second by Councilman Lautenbacher. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously of those who are here. Sharon, I think you need to read this one.
Moving to business items, the next item is Trees Atlanta Front Yard Tree Planting Program, Richard McLeod.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a renewal of a contract that we did last year with Trees of Atlanta with the front yard tree planting program. It was very successful. They planted 54 trees last year. This year, we're shooting for 80 trees. The cost of them did rise from 250 per tree to 275. So we're gonna adjust that in the budget for 2024. But we had asked for the mayor to be able to sign that agreement. And
Okay, anybody have any? I have a question. Can I ask it first? Do y'all care? So last year, I think we had 80 trees asked for, and then not everybody responded, correct? Or are we gonna run a wait list this year? Or
yes, we're
something?
extending our plan on the internet so they could, we're gonna leave it open so that there's plenty of time for people to.
And get a wait list or whatever. Okay, thank you.
When do these take effect? When is the window of apply, and then when the
October 1st through March 31st.
That's the planting. It's open now to sign up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, John.
Yeah, Richard, tell us about the funding. I know we're a tree Arbor Days city. Is this related to that? Is there anything in the sense the financials of this money, where it's coming from or where it's coming from?
Right. So the monies for this are dedicated by the city council. It's not part of the Tree City program. That is, and we can't use the tree recompense because that is dedicated to public trees. So that's why.
So our policy of when we remove a tree to do a project, we replace that tree, usually much smaller in size, somewhere else in the city and city property, city right of way. This project is to put trees on single and residential lots outside of the right of way. And we are paying for it based on this separate funding from the city.
That's correct.
All right, so it's not related to Arbor Day. Thank you. That's all I needed. Go ahead.
So let me just make sure, I don't want to micromanage each individual person that gets a tree, but the Trees Atlanta does the planting for them.
Correct.
And they are not going to plant it in the right of way, correct?
That's correct.
We make sure they're.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, I think this is an action item.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Harris, second by Councilman Seconder. Any further discussion or comments? Thank you for bringing this to us. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously by those who are present.
Mayor, the next item is on the agenda is item number 12. It's the second read of an ordinance to amend the city of Dunwoody zoning classification and map for zoning conditions of lot parcel number 18-345-0317 in consideration of zoning case RZ 2301 for 4470 Chamblee Dunwoody Road from OI Office Institution District Zoning Classification to OD Office Distribution District.
Can she go ahead and read the second one? Or do we need to read them separately? Oh, because you're gonna, okay, that's fine.
Mayor.
All right, go ahead, Madeline. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I don't have any additional information to present this evening. The applicant has requested deferral to the August 14th meeting in order to allow them more time to develop some different architectural options. And if you guys have any feedback on architectural options, that would be really welcome this evening. And if you have any questions, I'm available.
So if you have feedback, I'd like you to go ahead and give it to Madeline tonight if you can, so she can provide it to the developer. One of the things I think is important to point out, Madeline, is that there is no public road access to this property, correct?
Correct.
So that one of the limitations is that the only access is through the shopping center, correct?
Correct.
And somehow or another, when the office, so for those of you who are not aware, this is the property where the office building was behind Georgetown Shopping Center that the Georgia Department of Transportation recently purchased and tore down because it's in the way of a future highway project, or was in the way of the future highway project. But they bought the building and not the parking lot. So this property is the parking lot that remained, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, well,
Yes.
since you have 5 or fewer, you could defer, but I'd request that you table it to a date and time certain for purposes of notice to the public.
Okay, but we can still talk about it before we table it. But once we table it, we cannot talk about it because she's asked for input on architectural stuff.
Correct, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right, so does anybody have feedback they'd like to give Madeline to share with the developer? Go ahead, John.
I think I was one of the commenters. If you're looking at some of the drawings, they look very typical, very cookie cutter-ish, straight out of whatever the design school is to design every public storage facility in the United States. To me, I think that location right along 285 will be seen by hundreds of thousands of vehicles, and I'd like it to look a little differently, a little bit more unique. For example, there is a storage facility, this is just one example, at the corner of Peachtree, Dunwoody, and Mount Vernon and Sandy Springs that looks completely different design versus the cookie cutter with the windows looking through and seeing the roll-up storage units. To me, I think that location representing the city of Dunwoody shouldn't get a cookie cutter look to it. I think we deserve better.
Okay. Anybody else? I think I cannot call on you. I'm sorry. Correct. There's no public comment on the,
Well, the item before you is from staff right now.
Right.
With their recommendation to table to a date certain, so.
right. There was, I think somebody representing the developer had something to say. Am I allowed to call on him?
I would prefer that those meetings occur, if
With
any, with
staff.
staff.
Okay, if you'll just meet with staff. So does that help, Madeline? And I think there should be adequate room for pretty significant buffering if that's the way the developer chooses to go to make it so that it blends in with the trees or something. I mean, I don't really know, but I think it's a pretty big parcel for a storage facility, because I think they have been fit on smaller facilities. So thank you. And, all right, so now I need a motion to table to a date certain, which is August 14th.
At 6 o'clock, is that right?
Yeah, the council
Correct,
meeting's at
the
6.
council meeting on August
Okay.
14th.
Okay. I need a motion.
I move to table items 12 and 13.
Nope, you have to do them separate, sorry.
I move to table item 12 to the August 14th, 6 PM meeting.
Is there a second? Okay, moved by Councilman Lautenbacher, second by Councilman Harris, all in favor. Oh, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Yes.
And when Sharon catches up, she'll read the next one.
Item number 13 is an ordinance to amend the city of Dunwoody zoning map for zoning conditions of lot parcel number 18-345-03017 in consideration of special land use permit case SLUP 23-01 for 4470 Chamblee Dunwoody Road.
Okay, this is the same item. We'll treat it the same way. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I need a motion to table this as well.
I move to table item 13 to the August 14th, 6 PM meeting.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Lautenbacher, second by Councilwoman Harris. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Sharon.
The next item on the agenda is a resolution amending the budget for the fiscal year 2023 for the general fund of the city of Dunwoody, Georgia, pursuant to Article 5, Section 5 of the Charter of the city, beginning January 1, 2023, and ending December 31st, 2023, appropriating the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the item of anticipated funding sources, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures from exceeding actual funding sources.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you is budget adjustments for 2023. These are just revenue adjustments. So to give you a little bit of background, when COVID hit, we were very conservative in our revenue estimates and continued that on into 2023, as a matter of fact. What that resulted in was a budgeted use of fund balance of $2 million for 2023. As we heard earlier tonight, we have not used fund balance in the prior years or anything, but we were really conservative in our budget estimates for 2023, and we budgeted all our expenditures at the full amount, basically, meaning all positions are fully staffed for 12 months and things like that. And that's what led to the use of budgeted use of fund balance of $2 million. With COVID on the decline, I guess we'll say, the financial impact isn't as significant anymore. We took the opportunity to go back and reevaluate a lot of our 2023 revenue budget estimates. And based on current data that we have, as well as prior year history, we are proposing to adjust 6 revenue categories for a total of $1.5 million. With those adjustments, that would up the revenue budget by that amount and decrease the use of fund balance from $2 million to about $500,000 for fiscal year 2023. We're going to periodically continue to look at this and evaluate. There's still conservatism built in there. So we feel very confident that these numbers, these are attainable. These are the expectations that we're currently forecasting. And so we're comfortable with it. We'll continue to evaluate all revenue items as we move forward. I'll also chime in that there's an agenda item on the discussion about personnel costs. We will adjust those. We'll propose a budget amendment for those separately from this. This is just to adjust revenue at this time based on the current forecast that we see. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Questions? I think we're good. All right, this is an action item.
Yes.
Move to approve.
Thank you, John.
Second.
Moved by John, second by Joe. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That passes unanimously. All right, next. Sorry. HR team, these are discussion items rather than action items. We are. It's all good. Oh, whenever you're ready. I think she's getting it loaded. I think Heather's getting it loaded up. There we go. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
All right, I'm gonna need you to adjust the microphone just so you can be heard a little better, and sorry.
Is that better?
I hope so. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Oops. This next item on the agenda has to do with some compensation changes we're recommending. As you know, the city conducts a salary survey every few years to review our compensation against peers in the market. Over the past few months, we've been working with Evergreen Solutions on a compensation and benefits study. So tonight we have the project manager, Stacy Witchell from Evergreen, to present the results of the study, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have after her presentation. Thank you.
I'm not quite as tall. There we go. So good evening, Mayor, Council members, Mr. Linton. My name is Stacy Witchell with Evergreen Solutions, and I'm the project manager for your study. Been working on this since we started. I'm excited to be able to be here tonight to present this to you, and we'll go through the presentation. If you have any questions, we can answer them along the way or hold them to the end, whichever one works best for you. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Let's see. So this presentation is going to be an overview of the study. We're going to talk about the study goals, the phases, and then of course those recommendations. All right. Before we jump into the study, let's talk about the purpose of a compensation study and why organizations do it. You know, an organization's employees are your most important asset that you have, right? And you want to make sure that you're managing that asset appropriately, and you're making sure you're competitive in that marketplace, and you're as competitive as you can be and as you want to be, as competitive as budgets will allow. And then a compensation study also makes sure that you have you're meeting the needs of those employees. You've got the ability to recruit and retain top tier quality applicants and employees. It addresses employees' morale. Employees see that you're monitoring and managing the situation. And obviously too, it helps you to manage your budget moving forward. The goals of your project were to do that internal look, to look internal at your class structure. Let's look at your compensation. Let's look for any concerns, issues. Compression is one that's pretty common. Compression, whether between employees of the same pay grade, employees between employees and supervisors. Make sure that's not a concern. If it is, let's get that addressed. Your other goal was to look at your peers around you and find out how you compare to those peers. Are you equal with those peers? Are you leading the market? Are you lagging the market? So you understand where you're at and identify where you want to be and where you can be. And then obviously produce recommendations that meet your needs now, meet your needs in the future, and a plan that is adaptable and you won't outgrow and it's fiscally is sustainable. Your project began back first of the year, like all our projects, begins with data collection. So we've collected your employee database, your policies, your org charts, everything that you use right now to manage your pay scales, your salary schedules. Now, what that all that data lets us do, it lets us do what we call our assessment of current conditions. And that's where we look at those details of your current salary schedule. We're looking for the strengths of it, the weaknesses of it, what's working for you, what isn't sometimes, how you're using your plan. And what we found is you have one pay plan and for all your employees, general and sworn, everybody's managed on one plan. And then you also have a hiring grid for your police officers and detective level. Okay. We had 92 employees that were part of the study. You had 12 different departments or office areas, operational areas, and then 37 unique classification titles that were included as part of the study. Your salary schedule right now has two different range spreads from pay grades 101 to 110. You're at a 60% range spread. And a range spread is the distance between minimum to maximum. So it's that earning potential total across one pay grade. All right. And then from 111 to 118, it's 65%. So slightly wider at the higher pay grades. Your midpoint progression was 8% between all levels, except at 111, I believe, and that was at 10%. And looking at your schedule, what did we find? Your significant findings. Your schedule right now, it is very transparent. It follows best management practices as far as its structure goes. Best management says most organizations, their salary ranges are within 50 to 70%, and you're 60 to 65. So you're right within that range. We did find that about 60% of your employees are falling below the current midpoint. So you do have a little bit of compression below that midpoint position of your salary schedules. 31 of those employees fell within that second quartile. The average tenure was 6.2 years, and tenure increased across those quartiles if you divided your salary schedules up into quartiles. There was a compression between supervisors and employees, primarily within police and the higher ranking positions is where most of that was. 6 of those were within, those police officers or detectives were right at, or one actually exceeded a supervisor salary. And then sworn employees' salaries appear to have increased at a faster rate than your non-sworn and your general level positions. Maybe, there it goes. All right, to give you a visual of what we talk about when we talk about compression, if you look at that area of blue and the red that's in there right now, that's those employees that are at that supervisor's salary. They're very near it or the one that exceeds it. The area of yellow, that's the area where you want to watch, because that area is like the next level of compression. All right, and in your case in particular, 9, and there was about 9 of those individuals in there that are almost within that blue area. So the chart's a little misleading if the numbers were adjusted slightly. You're on the verge of even more compression. So we know that's something that we need to handle in the solution file on the recommendations. Now looking externally, we identified 20 peers, and this was a collaborative process. We don't do any of this in a silo. We work closely with your project team and your leadership team here. So your 20 peers here, these are the ones that were identified as organizations you're competing with for quality staff, whether it's recruiting and retaining, that turnover, inability to hire. So these are primarily the ones in your market area that you're competing with. All right, and you'll notice that there's 18 cities and 2 counties. Now, when we take and we go to market, what we're doing is we're taking a subset of all of your classifications, and then we're using those as benchmarks at those peer organizations. And what we're doing is we're matching job descriptions to job descriptions, not job title to title, because we all know that title to title doesn't always match. And we're looking for about a 70% match between the roles, responsibilities, essential skills of those positions. Okay. And matching at that level, that number, we had about a little over 520 good quality data points. So a really good representative sampling that we can use to build a regression analysis to make adjustments to all of your plan. All right. Those results were finalized in March of 2023. And when we were looking at your market position and where you needed to be, wanted to be in the market, we did look at that 85th percentile. An 85th percentile in your area is about the middle of what most of these other organizations are doing. Some of the organizations that I'm aware of are looking at anywhere between 75th and 95th percentile. So it puts you right there in the middle of where your peers are going. When I look at that position, the minimum of your salary grades, you're about 13.7% below the market. Okay, as we go to the midpoint, you're about 11.5% below, and the maximum 10.4% below. And so you're gaining ground as you go from min to max, but you're not really correcting enough. But the reason you're gaining is because your range spreads of 60 and 65 are slightly wider than your peers. Again, just a visual. I'm a visual person. I like to see the difference there, what we're trying to do. So if you think about this as being a bell curve, and if you look over that 85th percentile mark, that's where you're wanting to be. That hash mark area is the ground that we're trying to cover. Okay. Now, just a few examples here for you. These are some of the classifications when we were looking at just the ones I told you we took to market. These are the ones that were greater than 10% behind your peers on average. All right, and they're obviously not alphabetical. They're listed there in order from the furthest behind up to that 10% mark. And it's a mix of levels and positions in there. We did look at benefits as well. And overall, the city's benefits here, you're slightly better than what your peers are offering. You have a really good, healthy, I'd say, benefit package. The number that I highlighted there, that's the percentage of benefits as a percentage of total compensation. And you'll see there that the city is paying a higher percentage of total comp than those peer organizations. There's more details and all of the weeds in the chapter there, but to highlight a few things here from your benefit survey, some of the significant findings. Overall, the city's covering a larger percentage of health insurance costs compared to peers. There's a much reduced cost to employees for single and dependent coverage. Your annual deductible is significantly less than peer organizations. The city requires fewer years to be vested for retirement, but that's a great bonus. The city offers more holidays to employees than peer organizations. The only two, and I noted them there with a red bullet statement there, where I saw that the city was maybe at or slightly behind a peer. That was those accrual rates. You allow your employees to carry more leave time forward, but your accrual rate was slightly less than your peers. And one or two peers offered some type of insurance benefits to retirees, but that wasn't very common. So taking all that information in, what are those salary plan considerations for what those recommendations need to be? Obviously, we want you to be competitive in your marketplace. And we want to start with an adjustment of your pay plans by about 11.5%. Remember, that was that midpoint position. We want to maintain consistency and transparency and structure in that design. And we want to also adjust that hiring grid also for consistency purposes. We want them to stay consistent with these adjustments. We want to adjust your sergeant and your lieutenant at a consistent rate as the average of your police officer and detective adjustments. That will help address, that's one of the primary ways to address that compression we're seeing right now. And we want to allow for a minimum % increase for all employees, and then also allow for flexibility to meet future needs. I want this to be an adaptable plan that's going to grow with you. And looking at your classifications, doing those midpoint adjustments that we were just talking about, didn't truly meet the need of all the classifications. So this is the classifications that we were recommending based on either market and or your own hierarchy internally and organizational needs. So these are the adjustments we're looking to make for some of these classifications. These are all classification levels a grade up, none of them going down. Now your pay grades you had right now, I believe you had 18. So we are looking to extend that out to 20 pay grades. It doesn't mean you're going to use all of them right now, but it gives you room to grow. All right, so we're going to start at the pay grade of 101, and that starting annual salary is $35,900. And then it would go all the way through down to 110, and then down into that last group of 114 to 120. You'll see there's a little couple little visual color cues there. The blue, that highlight, that's where your police officers are. I just wanted you to be able to see where they fell within the plan. And then the green line, that's really separating those increasing levels of responsibility for your classifications. Okay, so that middle level there, that's your management, supervisors, and then higher and senior management down to 114 to 120. And you'll notice one thing, another thing that we did there is we did a range spread consistent at 60%. So I got rid of the 60 and 65. And we did a break at 110 and 114 to account of 10% pay grade adjustments. Pay grade adjustments, grade progressions to account for those increasing levels of complexity at those positions. This is that proposed hiring grid will be consistent with the recommendations we're making for police officers. Otherwise, we're maintaining the same structure that you have now, where you're giving credit for both years of experience and education. Since I gave you the visual for the compression chart earlier, I wanted to revisit that with these recommendations. You'll notice here that we don't have anybody making more than their supervisors anymore. And you'll see that the blue and yellow has also shifted there. And the yellow has shifted even more. It's no longer has anybody creeping up to that 95% mark. They're closer to 90 and below. We went through a lot of different options for implementation. There's multiple ways that you can implement new pay plans based on your needs, looking at budgets of the organization too. This is what we're recommending. So all of your employees without police officers and detective, we're recommending a current range placement with a minimum of a 4% adjustment. So this would be a 4% on average adjustment for all of your employees there. Your total implementation cost here is $281,000. The ones that would exceed that 4% there would be your sergeants and lieutenants. Because remember, we want to have them have the average adjustment that police and detectives are getting. That's what's addressing that compression. Police officers and detectives, you got 40 of those employees that would be impacted by the study here. Total implementation cost there is $238,000, an average percent adjustment there of 10%. Total cost would be $519,000, and then average percent adjustment just across the board, 7.5%, with an average salary adjustment of almost $5,500. Keep in mind, those are averages. So some a little bit less, some a little bit more. Okay. The other thing I want to remind you on that one too is that is based on a snapshot of data and employees. We know that employees are not static. They come, they go, they get raises, promotions, change jobs, but that's that budget estimate tool for you to use moving forward. Recommendations, like you guys do a great job already. Do the small scale updates to make sure you're where you want to be. You don't have any problems, any more compression kind of creeping back in. If you're doing that on a regular basis, you don't need a comprehensive one for 3 to 5 years. And then after 25 plus years in public sector myself, you keep your documents current so that they are relevant. So review, update as needed moving forward. And continue to progress your salaries the way you are. The pay plans are going to help support the policies and procedures you already have in place. That's it. Any questions? Any slides you want me to go back to?
All right, we'll start with questions. Catherine, do you have anything?
question about tenure. It showed at 6.2 years, which I thought was extraordinarily long given the age of the city. Did you benchmark that against other cities?
We did not get their average tenure at the other ones, but I'm working with a few others. If I get that number, I don't mind calling you back and giving it to you.
Do you have any industry averages on tenure?
Well, yes, I'm hesitating a little bit because COVID changed everything, but
Well, you don't have to guess.
yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, so a lot of times what I'm seeing in other areas is tenure is around 7 to 9 years. If you look across all quartiles and pay grades, some like you guys in some rural areas where people live and work, they're from those areas, they don't move, it will be longer. But an area like this, 7 to 9.
Well, I appreciate this thorough look at it because given the tenure and then the fact that we can get to median with where we want to be with the salaries and long tenure helps us. And it's kudos to the city manager and the department heads for making this a good place to work. So thank you for highlighting that.
Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, Nicole, and folks and Eric for getting this on the agenda and being presented. I know I've got some general questions. I know this is a very tactical, specific, detailed results right here. And I'd like to just have a higher level conversation, if you don't mind me for a second. Prior to meeting, was anyone on council engaged or asked for feedback before you met with us here? Did you work with anybody from the council perspective beforehand, like we've done on other projects and had consulting meet
Yes.
one-on-one?
Yes, well, we did but it's called your budget committee.
Oh, that was the
Right?
budget committee meeting.
Budget committee
Okay.
meeting.
Not been a
They did meet, okay. I look at, so I've worked for PeopleSoft, Oracle, I do HRIS implementation, so I know how these things come to fruition. I'm not a practitioner, but I look at total compensation as well.
Mhm.
And I'd like to see an apples to apples comparison on total comp compared to our peers. So you've provided salary information and you've given us some anecdotal bullets on some different things for some benefits. But I'd like to see a total compensation comparison of that dollar value comparison.
There is more data in there in the report. I just kind of put the highlights in the presentation. But in the report, there's additional data in regards to benefits. Health, retirement, vision, dental, leave.
So that would be great. And so
It's
can I
in
see
your
that in the
packet.
report that would show the comparison of us to the other peers and are we in that certain range or so on? Where are we in the total comp compared to our peers
You're exceeding your peers.
for total
Total
compensation?
comp. Yeah, when you pull benefits into it, your benefit package here exceeds that of your peers. So you're right, it's two parts of a whole, right? So when you're looking at them separately, if you look at your benefits package, it is more competitive than your peers. If I look at your salaries, your salary ranges, then that's where you're behind in the market.
Mhm. So do we have a conversation of entertaining the entire apples to apples picture of total comp to total comp and doing an across the board adjustment of the various to have on par? Did we look at any of those, or are we just looking at salaries?
For this part of it, we're working at salaries. But the report and the project overall did include a review of benefits.
Right, okay. And is that going to be a second follow-up on that or the benefits? Do you know, we're going to potentially?
It's in your packet.
Okay. All right, I'm just listening to what.
It's in the packet. It's
Okay.
chapter 4 in your packet.
All right, thanks. How about, have we entertained variable pay or pay for performance? I know they do that in the federal government, and you're starting to see that out for spot. Yeah, they do. OPM offers it by certain agencies. So spot bonuses, awards, pay for performance. Have you looked at that and our other peers and what you're seeing nationwide in public sector and city for pay for performance and variable pay?
So you're right. There's a lot of organizations do a pay for performance and they do a merit type based system.
Yes.
And that's definitely not uncommon. We did not specifically ask your peers if they had that system in place right now, I don't believe. Go back and look at chapter 4.
So we did that until a few years ago, right, Eric? And we moved away from it. We discussed it in the last few years, right, John? I mean, it hasn't been that long. Where the amount, we changed to a flat rate, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
So we used to have variable pay.
yeah, a little bit variable.
I noticed some of the, we don't have hourly employees. Everybody's salaried, right? So we don't have an hourly pay plan. Do we need one for part-time? I noticed we don't have any part-time, but some of our peers do. Do we need to introduce a potential hourly pay plan for any potential part-time people that we may bring in the future?
So I don't know if you're asking about hourly or part-time.
Well-
We have a lot of hourly employees,
Okay,
and that's included in the study that
Okay.
Evergreen did.
all right. So we're just,
We have right now, we're just about to have one part-time employee again, which is the Deputy Public Works Director,
okay,
and that'll be the only part-time.
okay. All right, thank you.
John?
Thank you for the presentation. I noticed the benefits were higher than other cities. One of the main benefits that we give is the housing stipend. Was that part of that 33%? I mean, or is that salary? Because I mean, that's basically cash every month if you live within the city limits. Was that part of the benefits compensation, or was that?
Yeah, that was included in there.
All right, so that was part of the benefits, which is cash related. And this study does not really take into consideration what other municipalities that list were doing in this current year. Does it explain that aspect of it? So in the sense of, if Sandy Springs is giving an 8% this year, that's not part of your study. In other words, I'm afraid that we're still going to fall behind other cities based on what we're looking at here. Have we been forward? Is this report forward looking, or was it a point in time as of last year?
So it was a point in time with your market data finalized in March. Having said that, so I did go look at a lot of those peer organizations to see what adjustments were made. And to see what does that look like with their adjustments, and if you're making these adjustments, where does it put you? And I would say you're still around the 85th percentile market position where you want to be on average.
Okay, if council, again, we haven't talked funding. Budget committee has not really figured out where any of this money is coming from. So this is a very theoretical question. Instead of the 85% threshold, if we moved it to 90, what would that do to our numbers? What would that do across the board?
So if you wanted to move to that 9th percentile, I could run the numbers for you and tell you what that would look like, but you got to keep in mind, so that would shift your position forward, which would be an increase in cost. And then that 4% then would also shift. So you're got a couple of increases. Just have to fit, how comfortable are you, and what does that budget going to allow you to do? I can run the numbers for you. That's not a problem.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of, again, we haven't had a big budget meeting. We haven't talked financials. We haven't talked long-term.
Right.
I don't know what other municipalities are doing. I want to make sure that we are offering a compensation package that is all encompassing. I don't need to be the leader,
Right.
but I want to make sure that our package, full compensation, all numbers, all in, as well as the quality of the workplace, the quality of the support from staff, the vehicles, the uniforming. I want to make sure that there's no other expenses. One of the questions I always ask is, what expenses are coming out of officers' pockets in particular, in the sense of uniform, in the sense of this, instead of weapons? What else is there that city council needs to be funding at a rate higher to make sure that our officers are fully supported from our perspective? Same with staff perspective. It's those types of questions I want to know, and I want to make sure that looking forward in 2 months, I don't want to see a raise that we give, but yet we can move backwards. Again, I don't know what's happening around us, and I'm not sure if you do, but if the numbers were workable, maybe we wouldn't have to do this major change in another 3 years. It would be pushed to 5. So I'm just trying to think it all through. So that's my only questions. Thank you.
So I think what I heard was an ask of Eric to make sure that we understand what out-of-pocket expenses are, particularly our police department has. If you could get that in the next I think by the next 2 weeks, you should be able to get us that. One of the challenges as mayor and council is very aware of is that once one of us makes a raise, not everyone else, there's a handful of cities that we're truly competing with. And, but when you go and look, with the exception of our neighbor to the south, Brookhaven, which copied everything we did because they became a city after us, our benefits package, the housing allowance alone, pretty much for our police department differentiates us from almost everybody else. And so, which is now up to $800 a month, I think. So, I did a deep dive myself today, trying to understand who's doing what in terms of salaries and benefits. And also one of the things, it's all very confusing to compare because everyone may have that first salary step for police that is 0 years of experience, but not everyone differentiates on education. And so that's also makes it complicated to compare. The other thing is that we have raised, this will be our fourth, I don't want to get it wrong. In the last 3 years, can someone tell me how many times we've raised public safety salaries? And as a reminder, we also did a bonus system with CARES Act funds during the pandemic. Just, so I don't know that we did a raise in 2020. I can't remember.
So you asked in the last how many years?
Well, since 2020, yeah.
This will be our sixth.
Six, right. So even if we want it to be perfect and long lasting, the reality is that our neighbors make it difficult for it to be so, I think, which is kind of the way it is. I don't know if Chief would disagree or not, but I think everyone out there is everyone that is able is paying attention to what everyone else that is able to do this is doing. And so I think this is a really good process we've undergone. I have some questions and they may be best for Nicole, which is, we have how many employees that fall under this level scale to 20 or whatever it was?
I believe with the addition of the deputy public works director, I think we're at 111.
111.
No, that includes you all.
Just an estimate. It doesn't have to be exact.
No, I think
A little over
I think
under is fine.
104.
104.
I think
Right. And how many of those are affiliated with the police department?
78.
So one thing I'd like us to look at some point is the other 20, is it 30 positions? Someone do the math, 30-ish positions. I see that you did some, there's some indications here that we're above or below some of those peer positions. I understand the challenges you face, right? Because like Alpharetta had however many employees and DeKalb has thousands of employees. It's complex, but and so I think that in the future, it might be best if I know we don't want to separate out police and I don't know what the other 30, everyone else pay plans, but it might, because for example, the housing benefit doesn't apply to anyone outside of the police department, correct?
Correct.
So just in the future, we can talk about it. We're not going to decide it today. Maybe we'll pull a committee together of council people or something. It's just the environment for hiring public safety, and we don't have fire, but the environment for hiring public safety is very different than some other positions. It's not easy to hire anybody. I understand that, but it's very different. And the dynamics of the wages and the changes that are coming at us as elected officials constantly in that particular area. So we can maybe form a committee or something and work together to figure out. But I do think, as we've shown, it's been a fairly regular we've needed to have a fairly regular review of particularly public safety salaries. So, okay. But I really appreciate the study. I think it's really interesting. I do, based on my deep dive, because I don't think Brookhaven considers education. I think we have the best combination of both in Metro Atlanta. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it. Go ahead, John.
we also might want to think about other creative financial benefits down the road to our police employees. Instead of going, the 85% might work great, but what if there was a cash bonus after 5 years to police officers in order to put a down payment on a house, which would then tie them into the $8,800 a month more? And there's just, can we be creative in a way of, if policing is our problem with the retention, is there a way to get more retention on those police officers with creative financing? I don't have the answers. I'm just looking at it from a perspective of, I appreciate the survey. I appreciate the feedback, and I think your scale is right on. But as far as a long-term retention of our police officers, is there any other creative things we can do? Something like that to get them to live within our city in order to get them that extra, $8,000 a year of housing stipend,
Almost 10.
10,000. But you
Right.
see my point.
Yeah, I do. And I think, Eric, we should begin internally discussing that with chief and deputy chief, leading the effort. We can put a few council people together. So thank you. I appreciate it. Does anybody else have other questions? And so we'll see this as an action item when? 2 weeks?
We're planning on the next meeting.
Okay, the next meeting. Thank you. I would say consent, but I think it's important enough that the public hear us talk about it again. Thank you very much. Wait a minute.
Thank you, Council. This next agenda item is one that Eric brought before you back in February. It's a discussion of converting contract positions from the Finance and Administration Department and Community Development Department to city positions. If approved, the city would bring in 3 accounting positions from the Jacobs contract and 1 position from the collaborative contract, the business license specialist. 2 of the accounting positions would be converted to financial analysts. 1 of the accounting positions will be converted to a revenue accountant, and the business license specialist will be brought in with the same title, but under finance rather than community development. This conversion would bring all the accounting and money handling positions in-house under the finance director for tighter control over processes. We included these positions in the salary survey with Evergreen to establish the pay grades based on market. And these positions have been slotted on the proposed position allocation and compensation chart that you have in front of you. So bringing these positions in-house is anticipated to be cost neutral and help with staff retention. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
John.
Heather, thank you for your presentation. You're relatively new and you've done a wonderful job
Thanks.
doing presentations. First off, kudos.
Thank you.
Love to have you here. As you've already discussed, these are only in the finance department. And if we look back in time a little bit, our finance department had a cash flow aspect of cash security issues where this will hopefully fix that. Richard, I see you're still in the audience. Could you please come to the podium and just give us some overview on how these positions will help your department in the sense of security and control, cash flow, things of that nature? Just give us why you think this is important to be converted over.
Sure. So, yes, you're 100% correct. These are the business license person is the person you meet at the front desk there. They process all credit cards, taking all checks, taking all cash. They go through a background check with the contractor right now. City led, with it being a city position, we would have the comfort level to know who we're hiring. We'll be able to recruit and retain these employees and things of that nature. So that position in particular, that business license specialist, is very important. The revenue accountant as well, all the money that court collects and PD collects as well, that would all flow through these people. So again, these people are handling a large amount of cash, a large amount of credit card transactions and things of that nature. Having that city-led background check and being able to recruit, we interview those people. We know who the pool of people that we have to choose from, and we can choose those people. We think that's a huge benefit. And while I'm here, if I could, for just a second, a lot of what the benefit about bringing these in-house is in the past, we've had a little bit of turnover in these positions. And what we're doing is we're training these people up and then they're leaving to go for a full-time position within a city or anything like that. Bringing these in-house, as Heather mentioned, would really allow us to attract and retain key individuals for institutional knowledge purposes, to make sure that we've got a continuity of staff going forward and things. So I do feel it's really important. These are critical positions to have in-house, and I do think there are a lot of advantages to bringing them in.
Thank you, Richard, for coming up to the podium unannounced. I do appreciate your guidance. And again, this city was founded under a contracted business model. But that being said, sometimes positions need to be converted over for logistical reasons. And since this is now a wash in the sense of the finances, what it costs us to do this is the same we'd be paying those contracted help. I'm fully in favor. Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, I've been on record for many years about keeping, if it's a cost neutral and if it's a skilled knowledge for succession planning for knowledge, you can look that up. I'm on record for supporting that. So thank you for doing this.
Heather, I just want to say thank you for answering my question before I asked it, that was it included in the salary study? So thank you for that foresight.
Thank you. Are we okay with this one on consent? So consent for this one, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so this brings us to the conclusion of our business meeting. Public comments, if anyone would like to address council, if you'll come up and speak and then just fill out a card. Yeah, that's fine, Mr. Katz. And if you'll just fill out a card again.
Yes.
No, afterwards. You can do it after.
Oh,
You can do
thank
it
you.
after you speak. You'll have 3 minutes
Starting now.
now, Mr.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to commend you for postponing the
Cats.
actually my item number 5, but that does not end the difficulty, unfortunately. The moratorium you passed in February, on February 27th, contains the exact same definition that's contained in the ordinance that was just withdrawn. And that moratorium is no longer the least restrictive way of accomplishing your goals. And the moratorium needs to be withdrawn as well. And I would hope that the council for the city and outside council would address that expeditiously. The second action item for me is that I have an outstanding Open Records Act request that is seriously overdue. And I hope that would get addressed. We're on our second extension until July 12th. And I have received no response, no indication that it's going to be complied with. The city has given itself 2 extensions to the statutory deadline for responding to open records. And it will be very problematic if it wants to extend it further. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll just grab a card, if you don't mind, they're on the back of the music stand. Join us and you'll have 3 minutes. We are so grateful.
Spinning, and I congratulate you guys on not having spinning eyes. You know where I stand on the bike path. I didn't want to really address that again. I did want to say that after I sat down, someone mentioned something about the Dunwoody 4th of July parade. Wonderful thing. I've been in it for several years. I was in it this past year and I got 3rd place. I don't know what it's about, but whatever.
We're not the judges.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun and it's great for the community. And I speak for all the people in it that I commend you on your support for it. I have a business card, which I hand out to moms all the time. And I give them the advice, put this on your refrigerator. And if the kids are acting up, say, I know Santa and I will call Santa. I hear back, I give this out thousands a year. And I hear back from hundreds of moms and every one of them says, it works like a charm. And I'm going to hand it with your permission. I'll approach the bench and hand you each one of these. You should post it on the door out here. And if you have someone in here unruly, say, we know Santa. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. If
very
you'll
much.
hand it to our clerks, they'll take it and then they'll distribute it to us. We appreciate that. I think I see.
One other
Oh,
thing I observed and sitting right here, I can't see these guys right here. You need to get them on camera or remove that pillar.
An old bank. We
Pretty
adapted.
nice.
Thank you. I think there's someone else. I saw you grab a card. Come on up. There's 7 of us. Normally, there's 5 of us today. If you'll just introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes, and thank you for staying.
My name is Martha Head. I believe you all received an email from me during the day, and thanks for the responses that I got. I'm just concerned with these big plans for Happy Hollow. I would, of course, much prefer that it stay just the way it is. My husband and I moved there to the present location, which is the corner of Happy Hollow and Fountainbleau Drive. We've lived there for 45 years, and we've worked to make the yard pretty. And this is going to change things if they have to cut into it 4 feet for the bike lane, and then have the grass strip and then the sidewalk. So I don't know what the answer is, but I just felt I wanted to say that. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for coming. Do you have your card? If you'll turn it in to the gentleman right behind you is good. Thank you. Thank you for staying. I believe, is there any other further public comment? I believe that concludes public comment. City manager comments.
No further comments, Mayor, and we do not need an executive session this evening.
Thank you. Council comments. Joe.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a short announcement. After consultation with my spouse Kathleen and many others in the community, I would like to humbly announce that on November 7th local election, I will be seeking to continue to serve the citizens of Dunwoody with a second term as your representative as an at-large city council member. Thank you.
Anyone else? John.
I hope Santa's work on my wife.
Yeah. We'll get you the card, John. Yeah, he's gone. We'll make sure you have the card. I wondered if that was the same Santa from the parade. Now we know. Anybody else? Seeing none, I need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Moved by Stacy, second by Catherine. All in favor, say aye. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.